Looks like we have a pretty full group today, so we're going to be talking about integrating our schematics into 3D panel design. So we're going to be looking mostly at the 3D side of electrical here. We're going to talk about routing of the wires, how to get a panel onto a 2D drawing. We're also going to talk a little bit about routing of a cable, and then we're going to finish it up by routing a harness. We'll create the harness in 2D, and then we'll go ahead and route it in 3D. I'm going to wait just one more minute here, and then we're going to get started. While we're waiting here, if anyone would like to ask questions throughout the presentation, please don't hesitate. On the left hand, or on your toolbar for the webinar, you'll actually see a questions area where you can type in questions. And I will try and answer them as I see those come up. If you have questions at the end, please feel free to type those in as well. This is scheduled for just about 30 minutes, so it really is kind of a quick little webinar. I'm glad everybody was here. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Now I first want to start here with a 3D panel. Now this is a completed panel, and I want to show how we're going to get to this result of our panel. So this is what the wires are going to look like after the routing. If we zoom in here, you can see they actually connect to the terminals as well as other areas on the components. So if you're not familiar, these components would actually have to have connection points set up on them, and there is a wizard in SOLIDWORKS Electrical 3D that helps take a component and make it a 3D electrical component. So that's what that's going to look like when we're done. So let's go ahead. I'm just going to close this one. And then let's go ahead and have a look at it, how we get to that point. So here is our panel. Now the first thing we need is we are going to need a routing sketch. So right now, all these wire trays, they already have sketches in them. They come with electrical, and out of the box they have that information in them. So we see that sketch line here. Now this is a specific sketch with a specific name on it. So what we want to do is we just want to add to this, or we're going to create our own sketch using this Create Route Path tool. And what we're going to do is draw a quick 3D sketch. So we could convert an existing sketch, so if you've already got a sketch that is roughly where you want your wires to go, you can use that. Also, you can create a new sketch, which is what we're going to do. So I'm going to choose to create a new sketch, and it says there's a new sketch created. And very specifically, Electrical is looking for a path name, or a sketch named EW_path. As long as you have that, then we are going to be in good shape there. So let's go ahead. We're going to start that sketch. Now again, this is a 3D sketch, so if you're not familiar with a 3D sketch, essentially what we're going to do here is I want to draw in the correct orientation. Right now I'm in my XY orientation here. So if I hit the Tab key, that will cycle to the YZ orientation. So I'm just going to start drawing a line at the end of that and come straight off in my along Z orientation here. I'm going to hit Tab so I can rotate to the other direction there, and we're going to come over by the door, and then we just want to route, or we're just drawing a sketch to rough in where we want our wires to go. And across there. So now I just want to look at that sketch, maybe stretch it out, position it. You can add dimensions to these if you want to. You don't have to. Let's make sure that our 3D orientation is in a good spot. So let's just pull that back a little bit closer to the door. Okay, and that's all we need to do there. So there's our route sketch. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is route our wires. So we have our route wires tool. And we can do this with the SOLIDWORKS route. We'll do that in a minute here. We're going to do a 3D sketch route first. This is a good way for us to understand where our wires are going to go. We want to make sure they're in the correct place. We're going to do all components. We're also going to use, let's use lines this first time. If I wanted to put round quarters, fillets on those wires that we route, we could. I'm just going to leave them straight right now. And we say go. So what we're doing here is we're really looking to determine if my wires are going to go exactly where I want them to go. So this will take just a couple seconds here. And what's happening behind the scenes is the wires are looking for that sketch named EW_path. And it's going to try and put itself close to those. It doesn't have to follow it exactly, but it will place itself close to that to give us the best route. That's why we drew the 3D sketch and the orientation that we did.
Jeremy, while that's doing that, we have a question that's come in. The question is, how much is routing being used? How much is routing used?
Okay, you do not have to have routing in electrical to do this. There are, a little bit later, we're going to talk about how you can use routing to help you, like route through clips and things like that. But what's happening is it's relying on the routing engine of SOLIDWORKS, but it is not part of routing. So you can have standard SOLIDWORKS and still be able to do this stuff if you have Electrical 3D. I think it's also worth noting that Electrical 3D does you no good if you don't have Electrical 2D schematic. The schematic tool is what helps you generate the schematics, and then we are going to rely on that in the 3D side of things. Okay, so here we have our straight lines to give us an idea of where our wires are going to go. Now everything looks okay, except I can see over here I have a 24-volt wire running through that wire tray, and I don't want it to go through there. So we have a tool called segregation. So what I want to do is I'm going to go into my segregation tool, and I want to specifically select that wire, my 24-volt AC wire, and I want it to not go through this wire tray, so I just select that sketch line there. So what that's doing is it's saying, okay, 24-volt wire, you're not allowed to go through that wire tray. I can also use this to say I want you wires to specifically go through other trays. So it's completely up to you on how you want to control that. We'll just accept that. And if we look at our segregation manager, we can see that specifically we've told this wire and that path to be excluded from it. So let's go ahead and route these wires one more time, because we now know that we're not correct for what we want. So we'll just reroute this. This time I'm going to use the spline so you can see the difference here, and we're going to go ahead and do another 3D sketch just to make sure. It's always a good idea to route it in the 2D side or with sketch lines before we actually add the thickness of the wire to it, just to make sure that that's what we want. Plus, I want to show you guys all 3 examples here. So, okay, so there is now our 3D wires, and that's what it looks like going through our wire trays and over to the door and connecting to our components. And you can see, based on our segregation, we told that 24-volt AC wire to stay out of here, so it now doesn't go through there. It actually routes over to the other side automatically. Okay? All right, so now we have that. Let's go ahead and make this our 3D wire. So I'm going to use the SOLIDWORKS route this time and say go. So now is where it's really relying on that SOLIDWORKS routing engine in the background to do this. Again, you do not have to have premium in order to do this. It's just kind of relying on that to route the wires the way we want them to go. Now the 3D route does take a little bit longer. And you can actually watch it here. It's going to start building all these connections. Okay, so our route is finished. I'm going to turn off the sketches so we can see our wires a little bit better. Also, let's hide these wire tray covers. So then we can see that there's our wires. Now the intersection of the wires, we don't necessarily worry that they're actually touching each other or intersecting each other, because ultimately the wires are not going to, but they're going to the correct direction and the location that we want them to. All right, so now we have our panel complete. So let's go ahead and drop this onto a drawing. I have on my Electrical 3D tab, I have a Create 2D drawing. So I one-click there. I'm going to choose which drawing view I want to use, which is my front view. So we'll just drag that out here. Escape to turn off my projected view. Let's change that size so it's a little bit bigger here. And we'll turn off our sketches there too. So that's what it looks like. Now, that's all good, but there's a lot of information here that we still need to see. So we have the option to create marks right on this drawing as annotations. And so when I select Create Marks, it goes ahead and automatically puts the marks on all of the components out here. So all at this point I would need to do is maybe position these marks a little bit cleaner. And I could go around and do that with all my marks. But all my marks are now correctly annotated onto my components, saving us a lot of time here. Now at this point, bill of material options are there, just like we would expect it to be as a SOLIDWORKS drawing. If you're familiar with that, I can simply drop on a bill of material. And I have all my normal functionality that I would with a bill of material. I could split it, I could add columns, I could make sure I'm using the template that I want to use consistently. So all that information can be there. Okay? All right. Do we have any other questions before we move on?
Jeremy, back to the auto routing. Is that based on a schematic?
Yes, it is. The schematic, I can actually pull it up here real quickly. That would be my control schematic for this particular panel. So all of that information is laid out here first, then we bring that information over into the 3D side, and we place our components, and then we route the wires. Okay, let's move on to our next piece. Okay, so next we're going to look at a quick cable route. Now with cable route, this is pretty much the same as what we are going to be. That is opening, right? It's pretty much the same concept, except we have a cable that's been established over on the 2D side. And while that's loading, I can actually bring up the schematic for that. Let's look at the single line diagram here. So what we have here is this cable. This is the one that we're going to route. It's connecting from the motor over to the terminal strip when the terminal strip resides inside of the cabinet. The schematic drawing would look like this. So this is the cable right here that we're getting ready to route. It's connecting back to my terminal strip right here. So those 4 lines right there, that's the cable that we're concerned about. All right, so here's our panel. The terminals that we've added are actually these 4 right here. So the 4 terminals in the schematic side. And let's jump over to where our motor is located. That is over here. And then we have this wire tray that's actually on the floor. So we're going to actually tell the electrical using, again, that sketch. There's a sketch right here called EW_path. And let's go to a top view. You can see what that looks like. So this is the 3D sketch coming from the motor over here through on the floor over to our panel. So this is the route that we're going to be taking. So what we want to do is simply route our cable. So we have a tool for that, route cables. And we're going to actually route using the SOLIDWORKS route, but we only want to do the one component instead of all cables at once, which we could do multiple cables at one time, but we can also do individual components. And we'll say go. So that is our cable. You can see how the connections actually come up and connect inside the motor there. And then you see it's following that wire tray there on the floor. So with that component selected, if we go to our top view, we can see how that is snaking through the wire tray on the floor over into our cabinet. Coming in through the bottom of the cabinet and connecting to our 4 terminals. And if we wanted to, we could even look at that independently just by opening that up. So that's what the cable looks like. There's the connections on this end and the wire connections to the motor over on this end. Okay. So next, let's real quick look at, let me just get this all closed. We're going to look at a harness real quick. And I'm going to show you first of all in the 2D side how to actually create the harness. I shouldn't hit save there, sorry. All right. So this takes a moment to open, so I want to get that started. And then let's come over here. We're going to look at our harness. So I'm just going to select to open that particular. Now these are in red. The ones that are in black, those are not open. The ones that are in red, that is telling me that that project is open by somebody else, whether it's a 2D, if you have multiple seats, or if it's in 3D. So if I select on that and choose open, it's going to tell me that particular project is open by this individual on that computer. Do you still want to open it? So yes, I do. So this allows us to see that concurrent information. I have a question if we can go into details on the schematic creation. We are going to, this webinar is specifically about the 3D side of things. We can get into more detail with you as a customer individually if you would like to see that. We also will have more webinars coming up in the future with regards to the schematic creation. So here I want to see, this is my schematic drawing for my harness. So what I want to do is I do not have a harness actually built inside of my project yet. So I'm going to go into my project here. We're going to choose to go into a harness and create a brand new harness. It's taking the mark H1. So that harness there, you see, it doesn't have any information in it as of yet, but that harness has been at least created. So what I want to do next is I just want to take all of these components and I want to add them to a specific harness. These are all the components that are going to be added, and I want it to go into my H1 harness. So I'll select that. Now if I go back into my harness, you'll see H1 actually has all the wires associated with it and the components associated with it as well. So now that I have my harness created, I can go back over to my 3D site. And the first thing we need to do is we need to assign a few components and insert a few. So we are going to look, let's see here, this one right here. So these check marks next to the components mean that they already exist in 3D. If you do not have a check mark, that means that it does not exist in 3D yet. So what we want to do is we just want to associate this particular component right here. So this component already is in our 3D system. That does not mean it does not have to be there already, but if it is there, you can actually associate it to the 2D side of things as well. So I'm just going to choose to associate that particular component to that 3D model right there. And now that component knows that it's inside of our system. Next, we have just a couple more components we want to insert. So we're going to choose to just right-click on that, and I can insert that component. I've got to get a better position there. So that snaps into place. Now, this particular component, the way the mate references are set up, it does not completely lock it into place, so I can very quickly just add a parallel relationship to make sure that that's completely mated. Now, next we have a ring terminal here. We're going to insert that. So I'll insert the ring terminal. Place that. Now all of our components are inserted. So at this point, the last thing to do is we are going to route our harness. So here's the connector. If we look at the 2D again, here's our connector connected to the panel. There's the clip we just, or the component we just added. There's the ring terminal we just added. So at this point, we just want to route our harness. So we have a button for that, route harness. If I have more than one harness, I can select which specific one I want. I'm going to choose my H1 there and tell it to go. All right. So there's our harness created. At this point, it's not nice and smooth corners, but we can take care of that simply by editing that particular route. So I can just, now this is sort of what the routing functionality looks like. And I just want to add a tangent relationship there. We'll add a tangent relationship here. And we can just keep doing this all the way around to help round out our corners. We also have the ability, we have a couple of clips right here. So I can choose to route through clips simply by choosing that and the clip. And I'll route my wire right through those clips. So we're running a little short on time here. So at this point, I could go ahead and clean up the rest of these corners. I can even look at that particular route all by itself, just by opening that up. And then that's what my harness would look like. One last thing, we can quickly flatten and do an annotated or a manufactured route, either one. I'll just real quickly do an annotated route, and we'll put this on a drawing so you can see all my bill of materials that are going to show up, the components that are there. Now, if I had a little more time, I'd go in and I could edit this and spread it out so that my tables fit a little bit better and place everything where I'd want. But you get the idea. All the information is there as part of the harness, and all of the bill of materials and the callouts, everything are all there as well. Okay. Okay, well, that kind of takes us to the end of what I wanted to show you guys today. Give you a little bit of an overview of how routing wires looks on the 3D side of things, how the routing of cables as well as a harness, and get that information out there to you. So if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in. Otherwise, if you have any information that you would like, or maybe would like to see a more full-blown presentation on electrical 2D or 3D or both, please don't hesitate to let us know, and we'd be happy to do that for you. All right, well, if we don't have any questions, I'll give you just another second or two here, and then we'll, if we don't see anything come in, we'll go ahead and end the session today. I want to thank everybody for being here. We have many more webinars coming up in the next coming weeks, so please feel free to join into those and learn a little bit about some of the new tools we have.